He asked for exactly 14 grains of rice, water at 64 degrees, absolute silence. Everyone trembled, except for him. No one imagined that the new waiter, humble and serene, would forever change the life of the most feared woman in Austin. What began as an absurd order ended up cooking something that not even power can control: love. The restaurant, the Southern Bloom, stood like a historic gem in the heart of Austin, its pink granite walls reflecting the last rays of the October sun. It was a Monday afternoon when Emily Davis walked through the carved wooden doors, her Louboutin heels echoing against the terracotta tile floor like precise gunshots. At 28, Emily not only possessed an inherited real estate fortune that spanned half of Texas, but also a reputation that made experienced waiters and renowned chefs alike tremble. Her light brown hair fell in perfect waves over her shoulders, framing a face of delicate features, but a steely expression. Her steel blue eyes seemed to catalogue every imperfection of the place as she headed towards table 8, her usual table, the one with a direct view of St. Michael's Square, with its wrought-iron gazebo and blooming crepe myrtles. French mineral water, at exactly 64 degrees Fahrenheit, 8 perfectly symmetrical ice cubes and organic jasmine rice, exactly 14 grains, steamed this morning and served on a white porcelain plate without any kind of decoration, she ordered, without even looking up from the gold iPhone resting next to her Hermes bag. The restaurant's waiters looked at each other with barely concealed expressions of panic. Emily Davis wasn't just demanding, she was relentless. In the last 6 months, she had caused 5 waiters to quit, 2 chefs to move to another city, and a manager to develop ulcers. Her social media reviews could sink a business in 48 hours, and her influence extended through social circles that moved millions of dollars. It was at that precise moment that Michael Johnson pushed through the swinging kitchen doors, carrying a tray of freshly baked artisanal bread. Tall, with an athletic build forged by years of physical labor, Michael was 32 and had the kind of quiet presence that drew attention without seeking it. His fair skin showed the marks of the sun and honest work, while his emerald green eyes reflected a depth that contrasted with the simplicity of his black uniform. He came from Oak Creek Borough, where he had grown up among the smells of his Grandma Hope's kitchen and the frustrated dreams of his father, who lost his small family restaurant when Michael was just 12. For years he had worked in construction, in farm fields, anywhere that would allow him to send money home and keep alive the dream of one day returning to the kitchens where he truly belonged. "Hey, the new guy!" shouted Alfonso, the head waiter, his voice trembling. "Mrs. Davis is placing her special order. No one else dares to serve her." Michael observed the woman at table 8, noticing the tension that radiated from her like heat waves in the middle of summer. There was something in her posture, in the almost defensive way she held her shoulders, that reminded him of a wounded animal trying to look dangerous. "What's the problem?" Michael asked, approaching Alfonso with calm steps. "The problem is, she's impossible to please." Her last order made Javier cry, and he has 20 years of experience. Michael studied the order written on the pad in a nervous hand. Mineral water at an exact temperature, perfect ice, 14 grains of rice. It was absolutely ridiculous, but there was something else behind these impossible demands. In his years working with all kinds of people, he had learned to read between the lines. Emily Davis wasn't just seeking perfection, she was seeking control in a world that had probably felt chaotic to her. "I'll take care of it," he said simply, taking the order pad. Instead of heading directly to the bar to ask for the mineral water, Michael went to the kitchen. He had worked as a kitchen assistant in his first jobs, and although he was officially just a busboy, his hands remembered the alchemy of creating something special from simple ingredients. He took purified water, cooled it to exactly 64 degrees using the precision thermometer he kept in his back pocket, a habit from his days helping his father at the restaurant. He selected 8 perfectly square ice cubes from the special freezer, each one as clear as crystal. But the rice was where he decided to take a risk. Instead of counting out exactly 14 grains of commercial jasmine rice, Michael took a small jar from his backpack, containing rice he had brought from home, special grains that his grandmother grew in small plots behind her house, a rice that had been blessed by 3 generations of women who knew that food was love made manifest. He cooked it with kaffir lime leaves he kept dried in his locker and added a microscopic pinch of artisanal Maine sea salt. When he arranged the plate on the silver tray, he included a detail that no one had asked for, but that his heart dictated: a small Texas bluebonnet, the same flower that grew in his grandmother's yard, placed discreetly next to the plate. Emily looked up as Michael approached her table, and for the first time in months a waiter didn't tremble while serving her. Michael's movements were confident, almost elegant, and when he placed the water in front of her, his green eyes met her blue ones for a split second that seemed suspended in time. "Your mineral water at 64 degrees, Mrs. Davis," Michael said in a calm, respectful voice, but without the terrified civility she was used to, "and jasmine rice, prepared especially for you." Emily took the glass of water, automatically checking the temperature with a digital thermometer she pulled from her purse. Exactly 64 degrees. The ice cubes were perfect. But when she tasted the rice, something unexpected happened. The flavor was different. It wasn't just boiled rice. There were layers of flavor she couldn't identify, a subtle complexity that made each grain a small revelation. It was as if someone had taken her ridiculous order and transformed it into something that was actually worth eating. She chewed slowly, and for the first time in years, she couldn't find anything to complain about. Michael remained standing by the table, waiting for the inevitable explosion of criticism. But Emily just kept eating, her expression gradually softening from its usual hardness to something resembling curiosity. "What's your name?" she finally asked, without looking up from the plate. "Michael Johnson, ma'am." "Where are you from, Michael Johnson?" "From Oak Creek Borough, ma'am. My family has been in the food business for generations." Emily looked up then, truly studying Michael for the first time. She saw the calloused hands that spoke of honest work, the proud but not arrogant posture, and something in his green eyes that made her feel as if he could see beyond the mask of coldness she had perfected over the years. "The rice didn't have exactly 14 grains, she observed. Michael felt his stomach clench, waiting for the coming storm. "No, ma'am, it had 17. "And why did you decide to disobey my specific order?" "Because 14 grains don't feed anyone, ma'am. Not the body, not the soul. I thought maybe you deserved something that was actually worth eating." The silence that followed was so tense that other diners turned to look. Emily Davis had fired people for much less, but something in the raw honesty of Michael's response completely disarmed her. "And the flour? My grandmother always says that food should feed all the senses. The blue of the flour makes the dish more beautiful, and beauty nourishes too." Emily carefully placed her fork next to the plate, which was completely clean. She had eaten every grain of rice, had drunk all the water. For the first time in months, she had genuinely enjoyed a meal. "I'll be here tomorrow at the same time," she said, getting up and picking up her bag. "Surprise me again." As she left the restaurant, Emily felt something strange in her chest, a feeling she had forgotten after years of meticulous control and demanding perfection. It was curiosity, expectation, something dangerously close to hope. Michael watched her leave, noticing for the first time the natural elegance of her movements when she wasn't playing the role of the Ice Queen. Something told him that behind those impossible demands and that intimidating facade, Emily Davis was much more complex than anyone imagined. That night, as he cleaned the tables before closing, Michael wondered if he had made a mistake or if he had planted the seed of something that could change both their lives forever. In his one-bedroom apartment in Oak Creek Borough, with the windows open to let in the cool night air and the distant sounds of a blues guitar, Michael couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about those blue eyes and the way they had softened when she tasted the rice. He had seen pain there, hidden under layers of control and demand. Meanwhile, in her penthouse with a panoramic view of all of Austin, Emily stood on her marble terrace, holding a glass of wine she hadn't touched. For the first time in years, she had eaten something that made her feel human. She couldn't stop thinking about Michael's steady hands serving the plate, his calm voice that didn't tremble before her fearsome reputation. Who was this man who dared to disobey her and at the same time give her exactly what she didn't know she needed? Have you ever met someone who changed your world with a gesture as simple as a meal prepared with love? Leave us a comment telling us what city you're reading from, like if this story touches your heart, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens when Emily returns to the restaurant tomorrow. Michael will have to overcome his biggest challenge yet. Chapter 2. Tuesday arrived with a light rain that made the cobblestone streets of downtown Austin shine. Emily woke before dawn, unusual for her, with a strange feeling in her stomach that she couldn't identify. During her morning rituals, yoga in her private gym, a breakfast of organic fruits cut into perfect geometric shapes, reviewing her investments while sipping imported green tea, she couldn't stop thinking about the appointment she had at noon. Appointment? She mentally chided herself. It wasn't an appointment. It was simply professional curiosity. She wanted to see if the new waiter could maintain the level of service he had shown the day before, or if it had just been a stroke of luck. But as she dressed, choosing a navy blue silk dress that matched her eyes and more comfortable heels, though she would never admit it, Emily knew she was lying to herself. Michael, for his part, had arrived at the restaurant 2 hours before his shift. He hadn't been able to sleep well, waking up several times during the night with ideas for Emily's potential order. In the silent, empty kitchen of the Southern Bloom, he prepared several test dishes, experimenting with flavor combinations that would honor both his grandmother's roots and the sophistication that Emily seemed to value. "What are you doing here so early?" asked Sophia, the head chef, a 45-year-old woman with expert hands and a maternal heart, who had noticed Michael's natural talent from his first day. "Getting ready," Michael replied, without stopping his fine chopping of fresh herbs. "Mrs. Davis is coming today." Sophia whistled softly. "Son, be careful. That woman has made chefs with 30 years of experience cry. Are you sure you want to keep waiting on her?" Michael looked up from his cutting board, his green eyes shining with a determination Sophia hadn't seen in him before. "I think that behind all that hardness is someone who just wants to be truly seen, Sophia. And if I can cook something that makes her feel, I don't know, special, then it's worth the risk." At 12 sharp, Emily walked through the restaurant doors. This time Michael was waiting for her at the entrance, impeccable in his freshly pressed black uniform, with a perfectly folded napkin over his arm and a smile that wasn't subservient, but genuinely warm. "Good morning, Mrs. Davis. Your table is ready." As he escorted her to table 8, Emily noticed how other diners were watching them discreetly. Michael walked with a natural confidence that commanded respect without arrogance, and she found herself feeling protected, as if she were accompanied by someone who genuinely cared about her comfort. "I won't be placing a specific order today," Emily announced once seated, folding her hands on the polished wooden table. "Surprise me like you said yesterday." Michael felt his heart skip a beat. It was both an opportunity and a trap. Emily was giving him total creative freedom, but also complete responsibility for the outcome. "Do you have any dietary restrictions or preferences I should consider?" Emily looked at him with curiosity. No waiter had ever asked her that before. They simply followed her specific orders or suffered the consequences. "I'm not a vegetarian, but I prefer fresh local ingredients. I don't like overly sweet dishes or those with too many spices. And," she hesitated for a moment, as if revealing a secret, "I like it when food tells a story." Michael nodded, storing every word in his memory. "I'll be back in 15 minutes with something special for you." In the kitchen, Michael worked with the concentration of an artist, creating his masterpiece. He had decided to prepare something he had never made before, a reimagined blackened redfish, but with techniques he had learned from watching YouTube videos on his nights off and adapted with the ingredients his grandmother had taught him to value. He took fresh redfish from the local market, marinated it with freshly squeezed lime, sea salt, and a touch of white bourbon. For the sauce, he combined heirloom tomatoes from the region with white onion, green olives, capers, and mild banana peppers, but in proportions that perfectly balanced the acidity, saltiness, and gentle heat. He accompanied the fish with dirty rice cooked in a homemade chicken broth he had prepared since 5 in the morning, and added a small mixed green salad with a cilantro and local honey vinaigrette. But the special touch was the presentation. He arranged everything on authentic stoneware plates he had borrowed from the main kitchen and decorated the plate with squash blossom petals and a few drops of chili oil that formed an artistic pattern around the fish. When Michael returned to table 8 with the dish, Emily looked up from her phone and was speechless. It wasn't just food, it was a visual composition that spoke of the American South, of tradition, of meticulous care in every detail. "My Grandma Hope's blackened redfish with my own adaptations," Michael explained as he placed the plate in front of her. "The recipe is over 100 years old in my family, but I added my own interpretation based on what you told me about stories." Emily studied the plate for a long moment before picking up her fork. The first bite was a revelation. The fish was perfectly cooked, moist and delicate, while the sauce had layers of flavor that unfolded on her palate like a well-orchestrated symphony. The dirty rice had a deep flavor that spoke of hours of careful cooking, and the salad provided the perfect freshness to balance the more intense flavors. But more than that, Emily could feel the story in every bite. She could imagine Michael's grandmother in a modest kitchen, passing down culinary secrets through generations. She could feel the love Michael had put into every element of the dish, the respect for tradition combined with personal creativity. "It's extraordinary," she murmured, and Michael noticed her voice had a different quality, softer, more human. "Do you really like it, or are you just being polite?" Michael asked, and the direct question surprised her. "I am never polite for politeness' sake," Emily replied with a half-smile that completely transformed her face. "When I like something, I acknowledge it, and when I dislike something, well, I think you already know my reputation on that." Michael laughed, a warm sound that made several diners turn to look. Emily realized she couldn't remember the last time she had provoked a genuine laugh from someone. "Can I ask you something?" Emily said after taking another bite. "Why are you working as a waiter? It's obvious you have the talent to be a chef." The question touched a nerve that Michael had been avoiding. He looked down for a moment before answering. "Dreams cost money, Mrs. Davis, and after my father lost our family restaurant, I learned that sometimes you have to choose between following your dreams and supporting your family. I work as a waiter because I need the money, but I cook when I can because it's what keeps me alive inside." The brutal honesty of the answer hit Emily in an unexpected way. She, who had inherited her fortune without ever fighting for her dreams, found herself in front of a man who had sacrificed his passion for family responsibility. "What happened to your father's restaurant?" Michael hesitated, but something in the way Emily asked, with genuine curiosity rather than social courtesy, made him continue. "It was a small place in Oak Creek Borough. My dad, Robert, had a dream of serving traditional American food with a special touch, but he had no business experience. A partner took advantage of him, convinced him to take out loans he couldn't afford, and when the business started to fail, he took all the money and disappeared. My dad lost the restaurant, the house he'd put up as collateral, and almost lost faith in everything." Emily felt a pang in her chest. She knew that story from the other side. She had seen her own corporate partners do similar things to small business owners. "How old were you when that happened? 12? That's when I learned that the world can be very cruel to people who just want to create something beautiful." Emily finished her plate in silence, processing both the extraordinary flavor and the story behind the man who had created it. When Michael returned to clear the empty plate, she stopped him with a question that surprised even herself. "Would you like to join me for coffee? There's a small coffee shop 2 blocks from here that serves a decent espresso." Michael stood frozen, the tray suspended halfway to the table. Was Emily Davis, the most feared woman in Austin's high society, inviting him for coffee? My shift doesn't end until 6, ma'am. I'm not asking as a customer anymore," Emily said, standing up and pulling out a $50 bill that she left on the table as a tip. "I'm asking as Emily, just Emily." Michael looked around the restaurant, where other waiters and even Sophia from the kitchen were watching them with poorly concealed curiosity. "Sophia," he called towards the kitchen, "can I take an hour? I'll work overtime to make it up." "Go, son," Sophia shouted back with a huge smile. Some risks are worth taking. The Moonbeam Cafe was exactly the kind of place Michael had imagined Emily would never frequent. Small, decorated with local art, with worn wooden tables and a tattooed barista who prepared coffee with the passion of an alchemist. But Emily settled into one of the tables by the window as if she had been there 100 times. "2 double espressos," she ordered from the barista, then turned to Michael. "Or do you prefer something milder?" "Espresso is fine," Michael replied, still processing the surreality of the situation. For the next 40 minutes, Emily and Michael talked like they had never talked with anyone before. Emily told him about the pressure of managing a business empire she had inherited at 22, about the loneliness of being seen only as a bank account with legs, about how she had developed her fearsome reputation as a defense mechanism. Michael told her about his dreams of one day opening a restaurant that would honor his father's memory, about his grandmother's recipes that he guarded like treasures, about the nights he spent experimenting in the kitchen of his small apartment, imagining dishes he would never have the chance to serve. "You know what's the saddest part of it all?" Emily said, turning her empty cup between her hands. "I have all the money in the world to make any dream come true, but I've forgotten how to dream. And you have all the dreams in the world, but not the money to make them a reality." Michael watched her, noticing for the first time the small lines of fatigue around her eyes, the way her shoulders curved slightly forward when she thought no one was looking. "Can I ask you something personal?" Michael said. Emily nodded, surprised by her own openness. "When was the last time you did something just because it brought you joy, without worrying about the consequences or what others would think?" The question left her speechless. Emily stared out the window at the square, where children played in the fountains, and elderly couples held hands on the benches. "I don't remember," she finally admitted. When they returned to the restaurant, something had changed between them. It wasn't romance. It was still too early for that. But it was a real connection, a mutual recognition that they had found someone who saw them as they truly were. "I'll be back again tomorrow," Emily said as she left. "But this time, I want you to cook something that makes you happy, not something to impress or please me, something that represents who Michael Johnson is when no one is watching." That night, Michael couldn't sleep again. But this time it wasn't from nerves, but from an emotion he hadn't felt in years. The possibility that someone might actually care to know him beyond his utility. And in her penthouse, Emily found herself doing something she hadn't done in a decade, planning something that excited her. For the first time in years, she was looking forward to the next day, but neither of them knew that the next day would bring a revelation that would test everything they were beginning to build. Chapter 3. Wednesday dawned with an unusual heat for October, as if the city itself anticipated it would be a life-changing day. Emily woke with a strange, almost youthful energy she hadn't felt since her college days. For the first time in years, she didn't check her emails while eating breakfast, nor did she make business calls during her morning routine. Instead, she found herself choosing her clothes with special care, an ivory-colored dress that made her look softer, more approachable, and thinking about what Michael would cook just for his own joy. Michael had arrived at the restaurant before dawn, not to prepare something specific for Emily, but to reconnect with the reason he had fallen in love with cooking in the first place. In the silent kitchen, with only the first rays of sun filtering through the high windows, he prepared the food that most transported him to his childhood, his great-grandmother Eleanor's legendary Brunswick stew. It was a recipe that required more than 30 ingredients and 4 hours of careful preparation. As he toasted smoked peppers until they released their smoky aroma, Michael got lost in memories of standing on a stool next to his great-grandmother, watching her grind spices in the stone mortar and pestle that had belonged to 5 generations of women. "This stew isn't just a dish, my boy," great-grandmother Eleanor had told him, her wrinkled hands guiding his small ones. "It's the story of our people. Every ingredient has a purpose. Every step is a prayer. When you make this stew with love, you're making medicine for the soul." Now, as he ground almonds, pecans, raisins, and sesame seeds into a silky paste, Michael felt the presence of all those women who had come before him, passing down not just a recipe, but a philosophy of life, that food made with love could heal wounds you didn't even know you had. At 11:30, when the stew had reached the perfect point, thick, glossy, with a reddish-brown color that looked like liquid velvet, Michael began to feel nervous. He hadn't just prepared a dish, he had bared his soul in a stew that represented everything he was and everything he loved. Emily arrived 5 minutes before noon, unusual for someone who had made exact punctuality a religion. As she crossed the restaurant toward table 8, she noticed something different in the atmosphere. The air itself seemed warmer, more welcoming, scented with aromas that awakened ancestral memories. "Good morning, Emily," Michael said, and the use of her first name instead of the formal Mrs. Davis made her smile involuntarily. "Good morning, Michael. What did you prepare for me today?" "Something that connects me to 5 generations of my family," Michael replied, and Emily noticed a new vulnerability in his voice. "My great-grandmother Eleanor's Brunswick stew, served over free-range chicken with seasoned rice and handmade biscuits from this morning." When Michael placed the plate in front of her, Emily was breathless. It wasn't just food, it was a work of art that told the story of a people. The stew covered the chicken breast like a velvet blanket, sprinkled with toasted sesame seeds that shone like pearls. The seasoned rice was perfectly fluffy, each grain distinct yet harmonious with the whole. The biscuits, still warm, gave off the unmistakable aroma of fresh dough. But more than the presentation, it was the first bite that transformed her. The stew exploded on her palate with a complexity her mind couldn't fully process. There was sweetness from cinnamon and a hint of cocoa, a gentle heat from the peppers, nuttiness from the pecans and almonds, a subtle acidity from the tomato, and underneath it all, a depth of flavor that could only come from hours of loving care. Emily closed her eyes involuntarily, and for a moment it was as if she could feel great-grandmother Eleanor's hands guiding every movement, every decision that had led to that perfect dish. "Oh my God," she murmured, and when she opened her eyes, there were tears threatening to fall. How is it possible for something to taste like this?" Michael leaned forward slightly, concerned by her reaction. "You don't like it? I can make something else." "No," Emily interrupted, discreetly wiping her eyes. "It's perfect. It's more than perfect. It's as if I've tasted the very history of the South in one bite." She continued eating in silence, savoring every element, and Michael noticed that her way of eating had completely changed. It wasn't the critical, analytical tasting of the previous days. It was almost reverential, as if she understood she was participating in something sacred. "Tell me about your great-grandmother," Emily asked after finishing half the plate. Michael sat in the chair across from her, something that would normally have been unthinkable in their waiter-customer relationship, and began to talk about Eleanor, about how she had raised 8 children during the Great Depression, how she had kept culinary traditions alive, even when everything else was changing violently around her, how she had taught each generation that cooking was an act of resistance and love. She used to say that a woman who knows how to make a proper stew will never go hungry and will never be alone because she will always have something valuable to offer the world. Emily felt something stir in her chest, an emotion she hadn't felt in years. Envy, not of the poverty or the hardships Michael's family had faced, but of the richness of tradition, of connection, of purpose that was in those recipes passed down with love. "Would you teach me?" she asked suddenly, surprising herself. Michael blinked. "Teach you what? To make this stew, to really cook, not just heat up frozen gourmet food, to create something with my own hands that has meaning." Michael studied her, looking for signs that she was joking or that this was another of her elaborate tests. But what he saw in her blue eyes was genuine hunger, not for food, but for connection, for purpose, for something real in a world she had filled with superficiality. "A real stew takes days of preparation," Michael warned, "and it requires patience, and being willing to fail several times before you get it right." "I have time," Emily replied, "and I'm tired of everything in my life being perfect, but empty." It was at that moment that Richard Sinclair walked into the restaurant. Richard was everything Michael was not. Tall, blonde, dressed in a suit that cost more than a waiter's monthly salary, with the arrogant confidence of someone who had never had to fight for anything. He was the senior partner at the most prestigious law firm in Austin, heir to an oil fortune, and according to all the high society rumors, the man destined to marry Emily Davis in a union that would merge two of the largest fortunes in the state. "Emily, darling," Richard said with a voice dripping possession disguised as affection, approaching table 8, as if it were territory that belonged to him. "I've been looking for you. You didn't answer my calls." Michael immediately felt the change in the atmosphere. Emily tensed up, her posture returning to the defensive rigidity she had shown the first few days. The transformation was so sudden, it was like watching someone put on a mask. "Richard," Emily replied in a cold voice, "I was having lunch." "I see that," Richard said, looking disdainfully at the plate of stew, and then directing the same scornful gaze at Michael, who had started to get up from the table. "Waiting for her to finish being served, I suppose." The implication was clear and cruel. Michael was not a person with whom Emily would be sharing a table. He was simply the waiter awaiting orders. Emily felt a sudden, unexpected fury. In the last 3 days, Michael had treated her like a real person, had shared his most precious stories with her, had cooked his soul into a dish. And now, Richard reduced him to the category of servant with a single dismissive phrase. "Michael is not serving me," Emily said in a dangerously quiet voice. "Michael is my guest." Richard raised his eyebrows, as if Emily had announced she was having lunch with an alien. "Your guest?" The word dripped with disbelief. "Emily, darling, I think you've been working too hard. You need to remember your social standing." Michael felt the blood rush to his head. Not because of the direct insult, he had faced classism all his life, but because of the way Richard spoke of Emily, as if she were a possession that had temporarily lost its mind. "I think it's time for me to go," Michael said, getting up completely and starting to clear the plate. "No," Emily said firmly, reaching out to stop him. "You haven't finished telling me about the spices you used." The gesture, Emily touching Michael's hand to stop him, was small but monumental. Richard saw it, processed it, and Michael could see his expression change from condescension to something much more dangerous. "Emily, we need to talk, in private." Richard's voice had lost all pretense of social grace. "You can talk here," Emily replied, not letting go of Michael's hand. Richard leaned forward, lowering his voice but maintaining a tone that Michael could hear perfectly. "Your father called me this morning. The marriage contract is ready to be signed. The merger of our companies will be announced next month, along with our engagement. This is not the time for the experiments." Michael felt as if ice water had been thrown on him. Marriage contract? Emily was engaged to this man. Everything they had shared, all the connections he had felt, had it all been just the temporary amusement of a rich woman bored with her perfect but predetermined life? Emily pulled her hand away from Michael's as if she had been burned, and he saw in her eyes the panic of someone who had been caught doing something forbidden. "Richard, this is neither the place nor the time." "When will be the time, Emily? We've been virtually engaged for 5 years. Our families have planned this union since we were teenagers. You can't just decide you want to play commoner because you're bored with your responsibilities." Michael felt like an idiot. Of course Emily Davis had commitments in her social class. Of course a woman of her position couldn't be genuinely interested in a waiter from Oak Creek Borough. He had been naive to think the last 3 days meant anything more than entertainment for her. "Excuse me," Michael muttered, moving away from the table with the plate in his hand. "Michael, wait," Emily said, but her voice sounded more desperate than convincing. "The lady is right," Michael said, turning with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I must remember my place." As Michael disappeared into the kitchen, Emily was left alone with Richard, feeling the weight of her entire privileged but predetermined life crashing down on her like an avalanche. "Good," Richard said, satisfied to have restored the natural order of things. "Now we can talk like responsible adults." But Emily was no longer listening to him. She was staring toward the kitchen where Michael had disappeared, toward the man who had shown her it was possible to feel something real in a world full of transactions. And she realized she had to choose: the security of a perfectly planned but empty life, or the terrifying but exciting uncertainty of following her heart into the unknown. What would you choose? The security of the known or the risk of the true? Have you ever had to decide between the expectations of others and your own happiness? Will Emily have the courage to break with a lifetime of expectations, to fight for something real? Can Michael trust that her feelings are genuine after discovering the truth about her engagement? The next chapter will reveal the consequences of the decisions they will make. And I guarantee it will be so intense you won't be able to stop reading. Give it a like, leave us a comment from your city, and subscribe so you don't miss the most dramatic moment of this story. Chapter 4. Michael spent the rest of that afternoon like an automaton, serving tables, clearing dishes, answering questions with mechanical politeness while his mind processed the conversation he had overheard. Every time he remembered Richard's possessive voice talking about the marriage contract and the way Emily had withdrawn her hand as if burned, he felt a pang in his chest that was part humiliation, part loss, and part an anger he didn't know where to direct. How had he been so naive? Emily Davis lived in a world where marriages were planned like corporate mergers, where emotions were luxuries one couldn't afford, when there were family empires to protect. Of course she had been playing with him. Of course nothing they had shared had been real for her, but even as he repeated these things to himself, a part of him remembered the way Emily had cried when she tasted the stew, the genuine vulnerability in her voice when she had asked him to teach her to cook. Was it possible to fake that kind of emotion? Or had it been real in the moment, only to be crushed by the weight of her social class's expectations? Emily, for her part, had listened to Richard for 20 minutes without really processing a word of what he said about wedding dates, prenuptial agreements, and the strategic importance of uniting their family fortunes. All she could think about was the expression in Michael's green eyes when he had said, "I must remember my place," a mixture of pain and dignity that had broken her in two. "Are you even listening to me?" Richard finally asked, irritated by her lack of attention. "Yes," Emily lied, forcing herself to focus on the man who, according to all family plans, would be her husband in less than a year. "I'm just processing everything." "There's nothing to process, Emily. Our families have been planning this for years. It's time for you to grow up and accept your responsibilities." The words "grow up" hit her like a slap. For 3 days, Michael had treated her as if she were the most interesting woman in the world, had listened to her thoughts and dreams with genuine fascination, had shared parts of his soul with her, and now Richard was reducing her to a capricious child who needed to be reminded of her duties. "I need time to think," Emily said, rising abruptly from the table. "Time for what? To keep playing commoner with the waiter?" Richard also stood up, his voice rising enough for other diners to start looking. "Emily, this is ridiculous. That man is not from your world. He can't give you anything you can't buy." "Maybe what I can't buy is exactly what I need," Emily replied, surprising herself with her own bravery. Richard looked at her as if she had completely lost her mind. "What do you think you need, Emily? Poverty? Worrying about money? Living in a one-bedroom apartment in Oak Creek Borough? Being the wife of a waiter who can never maintain the lifestyle you're accustomed to?" Each question was like a stab aimed not only at her, but at Michael and everything he represented. Emily felt a fury she didn't know she possessed. "What I need," she said in a dangerously calm voice, "is to be with someone who sees me as more than a bank account with legs. Someone who cares about what I think, what I feel, who I am when I'm not playing the part of the perfect heiress." "And you think the waiter sees you that way? Emily, wake up. Men like him see women like you and see opportunity, money, a way out of poverty. You're not special to him, you're a lottery ticket." Richard's words were like poison injected directly into her deepest insecurities. What if he was right? What if Michael had been acting all this time, seeing in her not a woman but an opportunity to change his life? "I'm going to talk to your father tonight," Richard continued, interpreting Emily's silence as capitulation. "We can speed up the timeline if necessary. A December wedding would be perfect." Emily looked at him. This man who had been chosen for her without her consent, who spoke of her future as if it were already a done deal, who had reduced 3 days of the most real connection she had felt in years to an immature whim. "No," she said simply. "What do you mean, no? I'm not going to marry you in December. I'm not going to marry you ever, Richard." The silence that followed was so intense, Emily could hear her own heart beating. Richard sat down slowly, processing what he had just heard. "Emily, I don't think you understand the consequences of what you're saying. Your father is not going to accept this. My family is not going to accept this. There are contracts, investments, expectations. Then everyone is going to have to learn to live with disappointment," Emily replied, feeling a terrifying and exciting freedom expand in her chest. Richard stood up, his composure finally cracking. "This is a temporary madness, Emily. When you come to your senses and realize you've ruined your life for a romantic whim with a man who can give you nothing, I hope you can live with the consequences." After Richard stormed out of the restaurant like a hurricane of expensive suits and wounded ego, Emily was left alone at table 8, trembling with the adrenaline of having made the most important decision of her life. But her courage lasted exactly until she realized what she had just done. She had burned all her bridges without knowing if there was anyone on the other side waiting for her. She needed to talk to Michael, but when she looked for him, he was no longer in the dining room. Sophia came out of the kitchen, drying her hands on her apron with a worried expression. "Mrs. Davis, Michael left half an hour ago. He asked for the rest of the day off." Emily felt her stomach clench. "Did he say where he was going?" "No, but he seemed hurt. Did something happen between you two?" Emily didn't know how to explain to this motherly woman that she had just destroyed her perfectly ordered life for a man who might not even want to see her after what he had witnessed. "It's complicated," Emily murmured. Sophia studied her face with the wisdom of someone who had seen many broken hearts in her kitchen. "Honey, let me tell you something about Michael. That boy has worked here for 6 months, and I've never seen him shine like he has these past 3 days. He came in early, stayed late, experimenting with recipes, as if he were preparing food for someone special. Very special." Emily looked up, hope and fear warring in her expression. "But he's also proud," Sophia continued. "He comes from a family that lost everything by trusting the wrong people. He's not going to put his heart on the line if he thinks you're playing with him." "I'm not playing," Emily said, and for the first time in her life she knew with absolute certainty that it was true. "What I feel for him is the most real thing I've ever experienced." "Then go and tell him," Sophia replied, with the simplicity of someone who understands that complicated problems often require simple solutions. "But be prepared to fight for him, because that boy is worth every battle." Emily spent that evening driving through Oak Creek Borough, looking for Michael's apartment. She didn't have his exact address, only that he lived near the neighborhood's artisan center. She parked her BMW in the main square and began walking the cobblestone streets, asking in every little shop, at every food stall, for Michael Johnson. People looked at her with curiosity, a clearly wealthy woman dressed in designer clothes, desperately searching for someone in a neighborhood where everyone knew each other. Some were kind but cautious, others were outright suspicious of her intentions. It was Mrs. Maria, a lady selling flowers at the local market, who finally gave her the information she was looking for. "Michael, Hope's grandson. Oh yes, he lives in the yellow apartments near the church. But child," Mrs. Maria added, studying Emily with eyes that had seen a lot of life. "What are you looking for him for? That boy is good people and he's had enough trouble already. I'm looking for him because—" Emily paused, realizing she would have to find the most honest words she had ever spoken. "Because I fell in love with him." Mrs. Maria nodded slowly, as if that answer had passed some kind of test. "The yellow apartments are 2 blocks from here, up the hill. But if you're going to hurt him, you'd better not go." Emily found the apartment building, painted a canary yellow that had seen better days, and went up to the 2nd floor following the vague directions Mrs. Maria had given her. She had to knock on 3 doors before a neighbor confirmed which was Michael's apartment. When she finally knocked on the right door, it took several minutes for Michael to answer, and when he did, it was obvious he had been drinking. His green eyes were bloodshot, and his expression went from surprise to pain and finally to a defensive hardness Emily had never seen in him. "What are you doing here?" Michael asked, not inviting her in. "I came to explain." "There's nothing to explain. Mr. Sinclair was very clear about the situation." Emily could see the apartment behind him, small but clean, with a tiny kitchen where pots and pans hung from hooks on the wall, cookbooks stacked on every available surface, and the lingering aroma of spices and dried herbs. It was exactly what she had imagined, a space where someone lived with purpose and passion, even with limited resources. Michael, please, let me come in so we can talk. What for? So you can explain to me how a rich woman has fun with the poor waiter before marrying the appropriate man from her social class. The bitterness in his voice hit her like a physical slap. I broke off the engagement, Emily shouted, and the confession came out with such force that it echoed down the hallway. I told Richard I'm not going to marry him, ever. Michael stood motionless, processing her words. Why? He finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. Because these 3 days with you have been the only days in years that I've felt alive. Because when you cook for me, I feel like you really see me. Because, Emily took a deep breath, preparing for the greatest vulnerability of her life. Because I fell in love with you, Michael Johnson, completely, desperately, without any logic or common sense. Michael looked at her for long moments, struggling between the desire to believe her and the fear of being destroyed if she was lying. Emily, you don't understand what you're saying. I have nothing to offer you. I have no money, no social standing, no— You have a soul, Emily interrupted, taking a step closer. You have passion. You have kindness. You have the ability to make me feel like the most important woman in the world when you prepare something special for me. Do you know how long it's been since someone made me feel important for who I am instead of for what I have? Michael felt his defenses begin to crumble, but the fear was still stronger than the hope. And what happens when the novelty wears off? When you get tired of playing at poverty and miss your life of luxury? When you realize I can't take you to expensive restaurants or buy you jewelry or— Emily silenced him by placing her hand on his cheek, a gesture so tender that Michael felt his heart break. Michael, I've eaten at the most expensive restaurants in the world, and nothing has tasted as good as the rice you made for me the first day. I've had all the jewelry money can buy, and none of it has made me shine like you make me shine when you look at me as if I'm precious. Michael closed his eyes, pressing his cheek against her palm. Emily, this is crazy. Our worlds are too different. Then let's build a new one, she whispered. One where it doesn't matter where we come from, only where we want to go together. Michael opened his eyes and saw in hers something he hadn't seen before. Not just love, but courage. The courage of a woman who had given up all the security she knew for the uncertain possibility of something real. Slowly, as if in a dream he was afraid to wake from, Michael opened the door to his apartment completely. Come in, he said. But I warn you, it's not what you're used to. Emily entered the space Michael called home, and she felt more at ease than she had in her penthouse of marble and glass. It was small, simple, but every object had purpose and history. The walls were decorated with photos of his family, handwritten recipes from his grandmother, and herb plants growing in the kitchen window. It's perfect, Emily said, and Michael realized she meant it. They spent the rest of the night talking, really talking, for the first time without the barriers of table 8 and the difference between customer and waiter. Emily told him about the pressure of managing an empire she hadn't built, about the loneliness of being surrounded by people who only saw her monetary value, about the dreams she'd had before life taught her that dreaming was a luxury she couldn't afford. Michael told her about the humiliation of watching his father lose everything for trusting the wrong person, about the years working jobs he hated to support his family, about the nights he stayed awake planning recipes he would never get the chance to cook for anyone important. But now you have someone important, Emily said, taking his hand. You have me. For how long? Michael asked, his vulnerability finally showing completely. Emily, your father is not going to accept this. Your world, your friends, your family, they're going to do everything they can to tear us apart. Emily leaned forward and gently kissed his lips, a kiss that tasted of promises and possibilities. Then we'll have to be stronger than all of them put together, she murmured against his mouth. That night, Emily didn't return to her penthouse. She stayed in Michael's apartment, sleeping in his arms in his simple bed, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood waking up, street vendors shouting their wares, children playing in the street, blues music filtering in from a nearby bar. For the first time in years, she felt like she was home. But neither of them knew that on that very night, in a corporate office on the other side of the city, a war was being planned that would test not only their love, but everything they thought they knew about justice, loyalty, and the power of fighting for what really matters. Emily's perfect world and Michael's simple life are about to collide in ways neither of them can imagine. Chapter 5. The war began at dawn on Thursday. Emily woke up in Michael's arms to the persistent sound of her cell phone. She had 47 missed calls, 12 from her father, 8 from Richard, 15 from her personal assistant, 9 from business partners, and 3 from Society magazine reporters who had somehow already sniffed out the scandal. Crap, Emily muttered, sitting up in bed and running her hands through her messy hair. Michael woke up next to her, immediately alert from the panic in her voice. "What's wrong?" "My father already knows." Emily quickly read the text messages, each one more threatening than the last. "Richard went to see him last night. They're furious is an understatement." The phone rang again. "Dad," flashed on the screen. Emily looked at Michael, seeking strength in his green eyes before answering. "Good morning, Dad." "Good morning, my ass." Edward Davis's voice came so loudly from the phone that Michael could hear it clearly. "Where the hell are you, Emily? Your driver says the BMW isn't in the building's parking garage." Emily had never heard her father use that language with her. Edward Davis was a man of iron control who handled multi-million-dollar crises with the calm of a surgeon, but apparently his only daughter's rebellion had shattered that composure. "I'm in Oak Creek Borough, Dad." "In Oak Creek Borough? What the hell are you doing in Oak Creek Borough?" "I'm with Michael." The silence that followed was so intense that Emily thought the call had been disconnected. "Emily Ann Davis," her father finally said, using her full name as he did when she was a child and had done something unforgivable. "You are going to come home right now. We are going to have a very serious conversation about the consequences of your actions." "I'm not coming back, Dad." "Not yet." "You're not coming back?" Edward's voice went up an octave. "Emily, do you have any idea the damage you've caused? Richard is talking about suing for breach of contract. His parents are considering pulling their investment from the Austin Center project. There are millions of dollars at stake." "Then maybe you should have consulted me before using my life as business collateral," Emily replied with a courage that surprised herself. Michael watched the conversation, feeling a mixture of admiration for Emily's strength and horror at the consequences their relationship was generating. Every word he heard confirmed that Emily's world operated on levels of power and money he couldn't even imagine. "Emily, come home now or I'm going to take steps you're not going to like." "What kind of steps?" Emily asked, although something in her father's tone told her she didn't want to know the answer. "The kind of steps a father takes when his daughter is being manipulated by an opportunist." Emily felt her blood run cold. "Dad, don't you dare." "I already dared. Robert Johnson owes 3 months' rent on the little house where he lives in Oak Creek Borough. Coincidentally, the building is owned by one of my subsidiaries. One word from me and he and his wife are on the street tomorrow." Michael felt as if a dagger had been plunged into his stomach. His parents, who had already lost everything once due to the cruel maneuvers of powerful people, were being used as pawns to control him. Emily saw the expression on Michael's face and immediately understood what had happened. "Dad, you can't do this. They're innocent people." "There are no innocent people when someone threatens the stability of my family and my businesses, Emily. Come home in 2 hours, or your little boyfriend's parents are going to learn what it costs to mess with the Davises." The line went dead. Emily and Michael looked at each in silence, the weight of the threat falling on them like a tombstone. "You can't let them do that to your parents because of me," Emily said in a broken voice. "And I can't let you be blackmailed with your life to protect my family," Michael replied, getting out of bed and starting to dress with quick, furious movements. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to go talk to your father." Emily jumped up, grabbing his arm. "Michael, no, you don't know my father when he's like this. He'll destroy you." "Emily, you don't understand. This isn't just about us. My father already lost everything once by trusting powerful people. If he loses his home too—" Michael stopped, emotion choking his words. "My mother has diabetes. She needs her medication, her routine. They can't be moving and stressing out at their age." Emily felt an overwhelming guilt. Her romantic whim, because that's how she saw it now, was endangering people who had nothing to do with her personal rebellion. "There's something else," Michael said suddenly, his expression changing to something Emily couldn't identify. "Something you need to know before we decide what to do." "What is it?" Michael sat on the bed, taking Emily's hands in his. "The partner who stole my father's restaurant from him 20 years ago. His name was Edward." Emily felt the world stop around her. "No," she whispered. "Emily, your father is the man who destroyed my family." The next few minutes passed in a silence that seemed to have physical weight. Emily processed the information, connecting pieces of a puzzle she never knew existed. "Are you sure?" Michael got up and went to a small desk in the corner of the room, from which he pulled out a yellowed folder. Inside were legal documents, newspaper clippings and photographs. "This is the original deed for the Heart of Texas restaurant," Michael said, showing her a document dated 21 years ago. "And this is the lawsuit my father could never afford to file." Emily read the documents with growing horror. Edward Davis was listed as the capital partner of Robert Johnson's restaurant. According to the papers, Edward had promised to invest money to expand the business, but instead he had structured the loans in such a way that when the restaurant inevitably struggled during its first few months, he could claim both the business and the house Robert had put up as collateral. "Oh my God," Emily murmured. My father ruined your family, and now he's threatening to ruin them again," Michael said in a bitter voice. "The irony is perfect, don't you think? The son of the man he destroyed falls in love with the destroyer's daughter." Emily felt physically ill. Everything she had felt for Michael, all the connection they had shared, now felt tainted by her father's betrayal of his family. "Michael, I didn't know." "I know," Michael said softly. "You were a child when it happened. You're not responsible for your father's actions. But I'm his daughter, his heiress. All my money, my entire comfortable life is built on the suffering of families like yours." Michael approached her, taking her face in his hands. "Emily, look at me. You are not your father. The sins of our parents do not have to define our future." "How can you say that? How can you even stand to look at me knowing what my family did to yours? Because when I look at you, I don't see Edward Davis's daughter. I see Emily, the woman who cried when she tasted my great-grandmother's stew, the woman who wanted to learn to cook, to connect with something real, the woman who gave up her perfect life for the possibility of something true." Emily began to cry. Not elegant, controlled tears, but sobs that came from the depths of her being. "How are we going to get through this, Michael? How can we build something real on a foundation of so much pain?" Michael held her, feeling his own tears mix with hers. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I know that if we give up now, your father wins. My family remains a victim of his cruelty, and we lose the only real thing we've ever found." Emily pulled back slightly to look at him. "What do you propose?" "I propose we fight, not just for us, but for justice. Your father owes me more than an apology. He owes my family compensation for 20 years of struggle. Michael, my father is one of the most powerful men in Texas. He has lawyers, influence, money, and I have the truth. And now I have something else." "What?" Michael looked at her with an intensity she had never seen before. "I have you, and you know your father's business better than anyone. You know where the documents are, how his company works, what his weak points are." Emily gasped as she processed what Michael was suggesting. "Are you asking me to betray my father? I'm asking you to do the right thing. How many other families like mine has your father destroyed over the years while building his empire? How many people have suffered to maintain your life of luxury?" Emily felt as if she were standing on the edge of a cliff. On one side was everything she had ever known, security, family, the only world she understood. On the other side was the unknown, the possibility of justice, and Michael. "If I do this," she said slowly, "there's no going back. My father will never forgive me. I'll be alone in the world." Michael took her hands, holding them firmly. "You won't be alone. You'll have me, and you'll have the satisfaction of knowing you finally did something that matters, something that makes the world a more just place." Emily closed her eyes, thinking of all the years she had lived without questioning where her privilege came from, without wondering what her comfort had cost others. "What do you need me to do?" she finally asked. Michael smiled, the first genuine smile he had shown since discovering who her father was. "I need you to help me get into your father's offices, and I need you to show me where he keeps the files on his oldest deals. It's time for Robert Johnson to get the justice he was denied 20 years ago." Emily nodded, feeling a mix of terror and determination that was completely new to her. "Okay," she said, "but after this, no matter what happens, I need you to know something." "What?" "That I love you. Not despite who you are or where you come from, but because you are the most honorable man I have ever met. And if we're going to do this, we're going to do it together, as partners, as equals." Michael kissed her then, a kiss that tasted of dangerous promises and uncertain futures. "Together," he repeated against her lips, "no matter what comes." Neither of them knew that in a few hours, their plan would lead them to the discovery of secrets that would turn their personal quest for justice into something much larger and more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Because sometimes, when you decide to do the right thing, you discover that the corruption runs much deeper than you thought. Chapter 6. The Davis Miller Tower stood like a monolith of glass and steel in the financial heart of Austin, its 30 floors reflecting the city lights that Edward Davis had helped shape for decades. It was Friday night, almost 11 p.m., and the building was practically empty except for the night security. Emily and Michael parked in the underground garage, their hearts beating in unison with adrenaline and fear. Emily carried an empty USB drive in her purse, while Michael carried a backpack with documents he had collected over the years, evidence of the betrayal that had destroyed his family. "Are you sure you can do this?" Michael asked for the third time, as they walked toward the private elevator that led directly to Edward's office. "No," Emily answered honestly, "but I'm going to do it anyway." The elevator ascended silently, taking them to the 30th floor where Edward Davis's main office was located. Emily used her access card, which as his daughter and heiress gave her entry to all areas of the building, and the doors opened into an elegant lobby decorated with contemporary American art and a panoramic view of the city. Edward's office was exactly what Michael had imagined. Opulent to the point of obscenity, with a mahogany desk that cost more than the annual salary of 10 people, shelves full of books he had never read, and business awards celebrating his contribution to the economic development of Texas. "The oldest files are in that safe," Emily said, pointing to a concealed door behind a Georgia O'Keeffe painting. "Dad keeps all the documents from his early deals there, the ones he'd rather no one see. Do you know the combination?" Emily nodded, approaching the safe with trembling hands. "It's my birthday and my mother's. Dad has always been sentimental in strange ways." The safe opened with a soft click, revealing rows and rows of folders meticulously organized by year. Emily found the folder marked 2003-2004 and pulled it out reverently, as if she were touching something sacred and terrible at the same time. Inside the folder were all the documents related to the Heart of Texas project: contracts, correspondence, bank records, and, most incriminating of all, handwritten notes from Edward detailing exactly how he had planned to take over Robert's restaurant from the beginning. "Look at this," Michael said, his voice barely a whisper as he read one of the handwritten notes. "Robert Johnson is the kind of naive dreamer perfect for this type of operation. His lack of business experience will be his downfall. By December, I will have structured the loans in such a way that he will have no choice but to sign over the entire property to me." Emily read over Michael's shoulder, feeling nauseous as she recognized her father's handwriting. "There's more," she said, pulling out another folder. "Look, here are documents from 11 other small restaurants Dad acquired the same way between 2000 and 2010. Entire families who lost everything." Michael felt a cold, controlled fury expand in his chest. His family hadn't been the victim of a bad deal or bad luck. They had been victims of a systematic predatory strategy designed to steal the dreams of hard-working people. "Emily," Michael said suddenly, "you need to see this." In a separate folder marked Special Operations, they found documents revealing a much larger scheme. Edward Davis had been collaborating with corrupt government officials to identify successful small businesses, then use regulations and inspections to create artificial financial crises that forced the owners to desperately seek capital partners. "Oh my God," Emily murmured, reading a list of more than 50 businesses that had been acquired this way. "Dad isn't just a ruthless businessman, he's a criminal." "Do you have any idea how many families have suffered because of this?" Michael asked, his voice trembling with contained emotion. "How many dreams destroyed? How many children grew up in poverty because your father decided he deserved to be richer?" Emily began taking photos of every document with her phone, then copied all the digital files to the USB. They worked in silence for almost an hour, documenting 20 years of systematic corruption. It was when they were finishing that they heard the sound of the private elevator. Emily and Michael looked at each other in terror, instantly realizing someone was coming up. Only 3 people had access to that elevator: Emily, Edward, and Richard. "Crap," Emily whispered. "It's Dad." They quickly closed the safe and tried to make the office look exactly as they had found it, but it was too late. The elevator doors opened, and Edward Davis entered like a storm of contained fury, followed closely by Richard and 2 private security guards Emily had never seen before. "So, here you are," Edward said, his voice dangerously calm. "My own daughter, stealing from my office like a common thief." "I'm not stealing, Dad, I'm uncovering the truth." Edward saw the USB in Emily's hand and extended his own. "Give me that. Now." "No." Emily's simple but firm refusal echoed in the office like a gunshot. Edward Davis, accustomed to everyone obeying his orders without question, was momentarily speechless. "Emily, you don't know what you're getting into. Those documents, they contain confidential information that could ruin legitimate businesses, cost thousands of people their jobs. They contain evidence that you've been stealing from hard-working families for decades," Emily replied, surprised at the firmness of her own voice. "Including the family of the man I love." Edward turned his attention to Michael for the first time, studying him with the calculating gaze of a predator, sizing up its prey. "Ah, the famous Michael Johnson, the son of Robert, the dreamer who couldn't manage his own business." Michael took a step forward, his entire life of hard work and dignity concentrated in his posture. The honest man you systematically robbed, Mr. Davis. But I suppose to you, honesty and stupidity are synonymous. Edward smiled, an expression completely devoid of warmth. You know what I find most amusing about this situation? That my own daughter is being manipulated by the son of the most naive man I've ever met in my career. The irony is poetic. The only manipulation here, Emily said, is the one you've been perpetrating for years on innocent families. Emily, darling, I don't think you understand the complexities of the business world. Sometimes to create greater prosperity, minor sacrifices must be made. Minor sacrifices? Michael felt all his patience finally run out. Is that what you call destroying my father's life? Forcing children to grow up in poverty? Stealing the dreams of entire generations of workers? Edward snapped his fingers, and the two security guards moved threateningly toward Michael. I think this conversation has gone on long enough, Edward said. Richard, call the police. We're going to report a robbery and trespassing. No! Emily shouted, stepping between the guards and Michael. Dad, if you do this, you'll never see me again. Emily, you're my daughter. You'll get over this rebellious phase and you'll thank me for saving you from ruining your life. I already ruined my life, Dad. I ruined it by living in a bubble of privilege built on the suffering of other people. What I'm doing now is trying to fix it. Emily pulled out her phone and showed the screen to her father. I've already sent copies of all these documents to 5 different investigative journalists, the state's attorney general, and a lawyer specializing in social justice. If anything happens to me or Michael, if you touch his family, if you try to harm us in any way, all of this goes public tomorrow. The silence that followed was so intense you could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Edward looked at his daughter, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years, and saw not the obedient child he had raised, but a woman who had found her moral strength and was willing to use it. Do you know what you're doing? Edward finally asked, his voice calmer but infinitely more dangerous. You're destroying your own inheritance. This entire empire I've built for you, your entire financial future. I'd rather be poor with a clear conscience than rich with blood on my hands, Emily replied. Michael took Emily's hand, intertwining their fingers in a gesture of solidarity that did not go unnoticed by Edward. Besides, Emily continued, my future doesn't depend on stolen money, it depends on building something real with the man I love. Edward studied the couple before him, seeing something he hadn't expected. Not 2 naive youths playing at rebellion, but 2 adults who had made a conscious decision and were prepared to face the consequences. Very well, he said finally. You win, Emily. But understand this, there's no going back. If you make this public, you are no longer my daughter. You no longer have access to anything I've built. You will be completely alone. Emily smiled, a sad but liberated smile. I won't be alone, Dad. I'll be with someone who loves me for who I am, not for what I have, and I'll finally be at peace with myself. Richard, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. Edward, perhaps we should consider reaching a settlement. If this goes public, there will be no settlements, Michael interrupted. This is about more than just my family. There are 50 families who deserve justice, and they're going to get it. Edward nodded slowly, as if he were finally accepting a defeat that had been years in the making. Then I suppose I'll see you in court, he said. But remember this, I have the best lawyers money can buy. This war is just beginning. It's not a war, Dad, Emily said softly. It's justice, and justice always finds a way to prevail, even if it takes 20 years. 6 months later, Emily and Michael stood in the kitchen of the Restored Heart, the new establishment they had opened in the space that had once been Heart of Texas, Robert Johnson's original restaurant. The legal process had been brutal but successful. Edward Davis and 3 government officials had been arrested for fraud, extortion, and corruption. The 51 affected families had received financial compensation, and several family businesses had been restored to their original owners. Emily had lost her inheritance, her social standing, and contact with her father, who from prison had refused to see or speak to her, but she had gained something much more valuable, a purpose, a clear conscience, and the love of a man who valued her for her moral courage rather than her bank account. The restaurant had been financed with the money Emily had managed to save before her accounts were frozen during the investigation, and with donations from dozens of people who had been inspired by her story of redemption. It wasn't luxurious. The tables were simple wood, the plates were local ceramic, and the decor consisted mainly of photos of the families who had recovered their businesses thanks to their bravery. But every night it filled with people who came not just for the extraordinary food Michael prepared, but to be part of something that represented justice, true love, and the possibility that the right thing could sometimes actually win. "Ready for tonight's service?" Michael asked, adjusting the apron embroidered with chef owner. Emily, who now managed the administrative side of the restaurant, with the same dedication she had once applied to managing her father's empire, smiled as she checked the night's reservations. "We have a waiting list until January," she said, "and a review just came in from the top food critic in the state. He says we are living proof that food prepared with social justice tastes better than any dish from a restaurant built on exploitation." Michael kissed her softly, a kiss that tasted of spices, fulfilled promises, and futures built on solid foundations. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "I love you too," Emily replied. "Thank you for teaching me that true luxury isn't having everything you want, but wanting everything you have." That night, as they served food that honored both Michael's family traditions and Emily's new understanding of what truly mattered in life, neither of them could have imagined how perfect this life built on truth would feel. At table 8, which was now a simple wooden table with a view not of an elegant square, but of the backyard where the herbs Michael used in his dishes grew, sat an elderly couple eating Brunswick stew prepared with great-grandmother Eleanor's recipe. They were Robert and Maria Johnson, Michael's parents, who had regained not only their financial security, but also their dignity and the respect of their community. Robert had started cooking again for the first time in 20 years, working alongside his son in the kitchen where his dreams had finally come true. "You know what I like most about this story?" Maria said to Robert as she tasted the stew that tasted exactly as she remembered from her youth. "What?" "That it shows that true love isn't just between two people. It's between two people who decide to make the world a better place together." Robert nodded, looking toward the kitchen where his son and Emily worked side by side, preparing food that fed not only the body but the soul. "And that justice," he added, "sometimes takes a long time to arrive, but when it does, it brings with it more blessings than we could have ever imagined." Emily came out of the kitchen at that moment, personally bringing dessert to table 8. Vanilla bean custard with a hint of cinnamon, served on authentic stoneware plates, decorated with a small bluebonnet flower. Exactly how it all began. Except now, when Emily served food, she did it with love, respect, and the deep satisfaction of knowing she had chosen the right side of history. "Did you enjoy your meal?" Emily asked Michael's parents. "It was perfect, honey," Maria replied, using the affectionate term she had started using for Emily after realizing this woman truly loved her son. "But more than the food, we love seeing our Michael so happy." Emily smiled, a smile that completely transformed her face from the cold mask of her heiress days to the genuine warmth of a woman who had found her place in the world. "I'm happy too," she said simply, "happier than I knew it was possible to be." As Emily returned to the kitchen, where Michael was waiting for her to prepare the last service of the night, they both knew they had found something very few people ever find: true love built on shared values, a common purpose, and the courage to do the right thing even when it cost everything else. Their story had begun at table 8 of an elegant restaurant, with impossible orders and rigid expectations. It had ended at the same table 8, but transformed. Now it was a place where families gathered to celebrate food made with love, where justice was served alongside every dish, and where two people had shown that when you choose true love, when you choose to do the right thing, the universe conspires to give you blessings you never knew you needed. And every Monday at noon sharp, Emily and Michael had lunch together at table 8, remembering the day their lives changed forever and being thankful they had the courage to choose true love over false security. The water came, however it came, and the rice came in abundant portions, because true love is never measured in exact grains, but in infinite generosity. What did you think of this story of love, justice, and redemption? Do you think Emily made the right decision in giving up her inheritance for love and justice? Have you ever had to choose between the easy way and the right way in your own life? Leave us a comment telling us what moved you most about this story, what city you're reading from, and share if you know someone who has fought against injustice like Emily and Michael did. Don't forget to like this story if it touched your heart. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate true love and justice, and suggest ideas for new narratives you'd like to see. What kind of story would you like to read next? One of personal growth, a love story in difficult times, or maybe one about second chances? Your opinion is important to us. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey from Austin to your heart. Remember that true love is always worth fighting for, and that doing the right thing, however difficult, always brings unexpected blessings. See you in the next story.